Good afternoon, and welcome to the December 12th meeting of the Energy and Environmental Conservation Committee. I'm Cynette Cavaliere, the chair, and as is our tradition, I would like us to go around the room, starting with Katie, and introduce yourselves.
Katie Rygg, committee member.
Roy Green, committee member.
Pat Schichler, committee member.
Cheremeteff, committee member.
Steve Daly, committee member.
Kevin Barry, Town Board Liaison.
Sarah Waterman, Town Staff Liaison from the Engineering Department.
Matt Prinzing, Town Staff Liaison from the Planning Department.
Okay, and our first agenda item is the review and approval of the minutes of the November 14th meeting. Were there any comments or corrections on them? Okay, can I have a motion for their approval, please?
I move to approve the minutes from
Second?
November.
I second.
All right. Cavaliere,
Aye.
Cheremeteff,
Aye.
Daly,
Aye.
Green,
Aye.
Rygg,
Aye.
Schichler.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next is the standing report of the Monroe County Environmental Management Council. So I did get this sent yesterday to Matt, so it'll be attached to the minutes. So the meeting in November was a talk and tour at the RTS, the Rochester Regional Transit Center, on Main Street, and we actually got an entire presentation on their zero emission program and what they're doing. And it's kind of fascinating because while everybody started with EVs as the way to go, they're now working on the hydrogen fueled fleet and all the things that they put in place to do that. So it was a really good presentation, and we had a really good tour. They are very proactive in terms of not only New York State, but the country. They have the first hydrogen bus in the area. I think that's in the state, as well as a full fueling center right now. So they're really working on it, and it's kind of a fascinating thing to see. But there are some challenges, just because of the nature of the Rochester cold winter has some impacts on the amount of how they can use these buses and how they're going to plan to get to 100% zero emissions.
Is there a temperature at which they can't?
They have a whole chart in there, like that he presented, that really talks about. We don't get cold enough for them not to.
Okay.
But it just limits the range to do that. So our next meeting is December 18th, and the topic will be agricultural and farmland protection. So that I know will be an interesting one for me to hear, to do that. So, as always, if somebody would like to come as a guest, let me know and I can RSVP for you and you can join us as a guest. Any questions on that?
And continuing, thank you for offering to continue that next year. We did submit, and you are the committee liaison for that for the town.
Okay, thank you. Katie, did you have a question, or you were just?
No, I did, yeah. Is there a bus currently carrying passengers, or are they just testing it out?
Nope, it's in fleet, yes. So if you're careful at looking at the buses, they tell you what they are on the sides by not only by colors and some symbols, but you'll be able to tell which one is the hydrogen-fueled one. Okay, moving on, review of required items. Do we have any town development projects?
We don't. The Silver Maple project that the report was submitted to the planning board and the applicant after our last meeting, that was tabled at the November planning board meeting and will be discussed again at tonight's work session meeting.
Okay.
But yeah, no projects submitted for the January planning board meeting, so.
Was it a run out of time issue for it being tabled, or were there
It was the
further
public
things?
hearing night.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare that an application will be approved on the night of the public hearing.
And there
Okay.
were
So-
resident comments,
Yeah.
which makes it even less likely that it
Okay.
would be approved.
And then, of course, the EECC's report was only submitted 30 minutes before the meeting. So, yeah, with the submission of materials and then also all the comments.
All right,
related
I was
to
just
being-
wondering.
Yeah.
Any requests from town board?
The town board last week had the public hearing for the res code, and although there were comments received from residents at the public hearing as well as the day of, only one set of comments was asked to be reviewed. All of the other comments were in favor of the code. So we'll review those at this time. The town board's looking for responses from staff and this committee. Staff have already provided responses for this committee's review. And like I said, we'll go over that.
Okay. So you can see those on the screen. I don't know, hopefully all of you had an opportunity to kind of scan those as we went through, or we got them from Matt last week.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a lot of these responses reflect the town's attempt to make the res code compliant with what is already set as standards within our current zoning regulations, model codes from NYSERDA, and kind of tying all those in and trying as best we can to ensure that our local regulations wouldn't be considered unreasonably burdensome by the New York State Office of Renewable Energy Siting, or ORES. Essentially, if our regulations, if our local regulations are considered unreasonably burdensome, then they can override any local regulations and essentially bypass whatever regulations we have, and we could have something that is entirely, non-conforming for our local regulations.
And I'll put an addendum to that. They can override our regulations for large-scale solar. It's not applicable to every single item that is
And
in
wind.
this. Sorry, and
Yeah.
wind. So the large scale. It's not applicable to every single item that's in
Sure.
our draft res code, but those, as well as if the review takes more than 12 months for any approval denial, then they can also step in at that point. Those are for projects that are 25 megawatts or larger, and that's what I mean by large scale.
How do we define tier 3 to this question?
I would have to look again. I just don't remember off the top of my head.
I would say based on
I
the
think
comments,
it
it was
was
the tier
20
3 and the principal use
Right.
west systems were the most frequently that he commented on. And yes, and it has happened. There are some circumstances in some municipalities where they have been, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting has come in and overruled, and basically, that municipality had the concerns that their authority got taken away.
One, I was chatting with an environmental lawyer who represents towns and is involved in drafting these type of codes for a number of towns in New York. And one thing that she recommends often is actually adding a tier 4, where that tier 4 is really geared towards ORA's size projects, 25 megawatts. And then with the rest of tier 3, you can have it be as rigorous as you want because you're not subject to preemption without having to kind of worry about that ORA's overlay. I haven't personally dug into that myself, but I thought it was a pretty creative solution to the ORA's issue.
So Matt pulled up the definition as we have it in the draft res code, and it is any solar energy system that exceeds the parameters of tier 3 and tier 2 solar energy systems.
Tier 1 and
Sorry,
tier
tier
2.
1 and tier 2, thank you.
Will you make the screen bigger?
And then with that, I'll refer to tier 2 because that's the larger of the two. And that's ground-mounted solar energy systems with a nameplate capacity of up to 25 kilowatt DC, a total surface area of all solar panels on the lot of up to 4,000 square feet, and generate no more than 125% of the electricity consumed on the site over the previous 12 months. Tier 1 is roof-mounted or building, structure-mounted, building integrated is the right term. Smaller or equal to that. So tier 3 would be anything larger than that 25 kilowatt DC and larger than the 4,000 square feet on a lot, or larger than 125% of the use. So that would include those larger projects that ORES can review. It's the right acronym, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And then any in between.
That's a big range between 25 kilowatts DC and a megawatt, 2 megawatts, 25 megawatts.
That's correct.
So
So the comments that came from the resident primarily apply to commercial solar and wind facilities. Those would be principal use, so they would not be facilities that would be equating to 125% of anything. So all of them would fall under that tier 3 status for solar and principal use wind.
So I think you're going to go through and look at the different concerns that he had. I know, like, the first one was setback, and he kind of gave what he proposed were setbacks that he thought we should use.
Yep.
And then the red text is town review.
Yeah, what would essentially be the response from town staff and EECC, as
Okay.
long as EECC
And
feels
then
that
you also
they're
did
adequate.
comments to the side that kind of say what is,
Yeah, in
what is
case-
it currently,
The
so we
current
have the
standards.
reference.
Right, in case anyone from EECC wanted to have that on hand. So the resident was suggesting a setback to the perimeter fencing being 200 feet from the adjacent property line and 500 feet from all adjacent residential structures. And then for principal use wind energy system, setback 1,500 feet from adjacent residential structures. And these are the standards, so they're asking for an increase from 50 feet from the adjacent property line to 200, so,
And also be aware, he's saying setback to the perimeter fencing. So that is, if you're looking at setbacks, that could be the perimeter fencing is on the property line, or it could be within the property line and it still has to be further back. So that is a defining feature that we do not consider. It's not to perimeter fencing for setbacks in our code, it is to lot line.
yeah, I think it should be consistent with how we have that with the property boundary.
okay.
Agreed.
But I do think, for those large projects that he's talking about, potentially, the ORE size and larger, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a bigger setback for those projects than what we'd have for residential. Maybe putting a fourth tier in might make sense.
I mean, so part of the challenge with the ORAS thing is actually you almost want it to be less burdensome on some level because you don't want to get preempted. So, I mean, if you end up applying more stringent requirements for Tier 4 that's different than residential, I think ORAS could say that's unduly burdensome. But to me, the bigger concern is that with Tier 3, there's a lot that ORAS is not preempting that we could be more rigorous in applying standards to, which could include setback requirements without having to worry about the ORAS issue.
Yes. I think a valid question for pertaining to this comment for these you committee members are, do you feel that we do need to be more stringent for larger scale solar? And consider with that, depending how stringent we are, we could be too stringent to the point of large scale solar, just there aren't properties in town that can happen. So that needs to be considered, not don't do it, just that needs to be considered.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that these numbers put in here are the right numbers either. I mean, that's just I don't know where those numbers came from. But it does make sense to me if there is that range between that 25 kW and that 25 megawatt, that's a big range of projects. And, a megawatt project is a lot of solar panels. It takes up a significant area. I don't know if there would be acreage to support a 25 megawatt project in our town, honestly, for solar. But that being said, it might make sense to cut out that tier 4, so your ORI's, goes away, or you have it in the tier 4, then the tier 3, you have more room to make it a little bit more stringent and not have to worry about ORI's period.
I don't know, I kind of felt that what we'd put in place, which is reflective in what's in the sidebar column, already had a lot of protections in there, especially the minimum setback of 1,200 feet from adjacent dwelling units compared to his 1,500 feet. I mean, so it's already within the scale fairly close, or fairly far, as the case may be.
Where did the 50 feet and the 100 feet come from?
So for the 50 feet, 100 feet, and then this was also in reference to principal wind energy systems, the 1.5 times the hub height. It's all from model codes that we got from New York State DEC. So I would ask, if we're asking for increased setbacks, why? Other than to just increase the buffer between residential properties, which I'm
Yeah, I
not
don't-
sure if it's,
I'm not saying that we should do that either. I'm saying that for the existing, the way the tier 3 is written, though, I'm getting stuck on the huge difference between a 25 kW system and a large-scale solar that's ginormous fields of solar, essentially.
Is there a way you would, other than the scale of the project, is there something because of the larger scale of a project that you would feel a larger setback is necessary?
Yeah, I just buffer for, like, just think about it, if you're living next to that, it's like, the more buffer you have, the more you're gonna feel comfortable having that in there. So like, if it's right next to your property line, or 50 feet away from your property line, or 100 feet away from your house, you're looking right out on that field. Maybe that's an issue for some people, maybe not. For me, yeah, I would be okay with it, but some people might have an issue with it.
Except that there should be, at maturity, bushes or trees that block that.
Should.
Or a
Buffer.
berm
Or
or
a
something.
berm, yeah.
When the couple that are in Penfield do have that privacy, and we put
those
that
are-
in.
Those are by authorities or by, well, those that are in Penfield currently are by authorities and/or the town. So they're not any private use or commercial use at this time.
But we did put that also in the code,
We
was
did.
the idea of the privacy.
Yeah, for the solar, but for the wind, you're not gonna have a berm that's gonna block wind.
No, but we did limit the height of wind towers to, I think it's just over 200 feet? Or is it 200?
So ORES has tables that state their facility setbacks, and they're well under what's recommended. So there's, non-participating residential property, 100 feet. Center of public roads, 50 feet. Non-participating property lines, 50 feet. Non-participating occupied residences, 250 feet. So we are being more conservative
Okay,
At this time.
at this time.
okay.
Yeah, so we don't want to set ourselves up for challenges.
Well, and yes, I agree, we don't want to do that. I don't think that is the only thing that should be considered by this committee. I think we should consider what we generally understand the desire to be from residents.
Yep.
There was, like I said, there was a lot of feedback from residents in a positive way for this code, in support of it, as well as like commercial entities provided positive feedback.
Okay.
But we, right now, need to consider these comments and how we feel it's appropriate to respond. So if you're comfortable with it, and if, then I'd like to go from the first comment to the next, to the second screening. If you feel like more discussion is necessary on setbacks, then let's have it.
Could I ask one question on Roy's? So Roy's making a case for having, a pullout of Tier 4. Can you speak to why don't do that? Sorry, I'm,
It's okay. We can absolutely do that if that's a desire.
Is it-
Are
is
you
there-
looking for potential negatives of doing that?
right,
Or-
right,
okay.
yeah.
If we do that, realistically, the biggest negative is it slows down the process of this code. and it getting approved. That's the biggest negative. Some people may not feel that's a negative. That's completely fine. If we pull out a tier 4, then we need to figure out what those standards are, and whether that's, we want to be more stringent, less stringent, where you want to go with it. My opinion as a staff member is if we pull out a tier 4, I think there should be a reason to do that. And whatever that reason is, I think this committee needs to have a consensus that they think there are more benefits to pulling out a tier 4 and writing that than moving forward with the code as it is.
Thank you.
And I have to be honest, until he said something, I'd never heard of a tier 4. So it's kind of like, you know, or it's like the best ice cream flavor is the reason we want it is because we just heard about it, or is it, you know, like.
Well, what's the advantages of doing a tier 4? In my mind, it allows you to, you know, cut out that piece of it, the larger scale, and maybe it's a tier 4. The large scale ones is just following the ORI's citing, so you just model that and it's done. But tier 3, then you can be as stringent as you want, and not have to worry about it. But honestly, after talking through this, I don't know if I would change anything from the way tier 3 is written now. So I'm okay with it.
Okay.
I mean, here's my reaction. I mean, in looking, so frankly, I would like to look at the comments a bit further after the discussion, but a lot of the staff's responses were, if our regulations are too burdensome, then we have an ORIS issue. And to me, tier 4 avoids that issue. So if the town decided to make its tier 3 more rigorous, there's a method of doing that. So to me, I think if the committee ultimately decides that we're comfortable with where things are, then that's fine. I guess my reaction is I would like to look at these comments separating the ORIS issue, knowing that there's a method for actually doing so.
I appreciate that. At this time, I can be very straightforward with committee members. The staff would not have encouraged this committee to move the code to the board if we were not supportive of it. So if we felt that there needed to be more stringent guidelines or anything like that to be similar to other towns that are comparable and or following the same direction that our town is following towards sustainability measures, then we would have already brought that up. So part of the reason that a lot of these responses do refer to ORIS, it's because town staff doesn't have reasoning for us at this time to move forward with these comments and implement them.
With the more rigorous
With the
comments.
more rigorous-
Okay, just want to make sure
Items.
those comments, okay.
If you committee members feel that any of these comments should be implemented in whatever way or should not for whatever way, those are comments that we very much want to add to this document for the town board's review. So please look at it from the two sides of that.
Okay.
So from our perspective, we can actually look if that concern of the unreasonably burdensome even has precedence for the comment, for the response from the town. Because it looks to me, if I read the first one, the response is, we used other model codes. We feel it provides a balance between zoning and characteristics of the towns and potential impacts. So we really, if we stop the comment there, is that robust reasoning enough to say, no, what we have in the code is fine, period?
I don't think you need that last sentence, honestly. I think you should just
Okay.
get rid of the ORI's comment, because it doesn't really add much.
I think it's good for us to have in the back of our minds, but I think based on your comment, let's look at it not including that comment as we go through these.
Because then it's kind of a pat every time answer. and
Right.
That can be off-putting.
But I think that's kind
It's
of
a
how we
constant
started. What did
response.
we find in other code?
Right.
You know, where did this number come from? And to verify that that was the reasoning.
So, and for clarity, we did use both the NYSERDA model code and we referred to other town codes in the area. It was not just one or the other. There was a huge slew of items that were considered.
Okay.
If you're comfortable,
It's
we'll move on to
consistent with
screening. Oh,
NYSERDA.
sorry.
No,
Go
it's
ahead, please.
consistent with NYSERDA. If you did add a tier 4, it would just change the language of our tier 3.
Right. Screening?
Screening. So this was mainly providing, some recommendations for tree size, species, spacing, things like that. And so our response pretty much clarifies that we have standards for reviewing landscape plans, reviewing what species and spacing, and then also guarantees for plantings. So does that seem like an appropriate?
And I was fine with the red comment.
Yeah.
Especially since I was not necessarily personally in agreement with specifying a species or a starting tree size. To me, it's more, it's the same kind of thing. Like, we can say we need to put in trees every 6 feet and then 3 of them die. You want to make sure that you put in a plan that works for the site.
I would say in most applications that come before the planning board, the discussion of what screening is appropriate oftentimes is a discussion between the applicant and the actual neighbor that they're screening with. So they'll consider and they'll have this conversation. It doesn't always happen, but a lot of times the neighbor who will be directly impacted by those screening materials will have a conversation with the applicant.
Especially
It's not a
since
requirement,
fencing
but-
or a berm, there's a lot of other options besides trees.
As well as the consideration of, we don't want to in code define species or spacing that may be different based on this different species,
Yeah.
because those can change based on what is currently popular, what is currently useful, what diseases are out there. We don't want to codify
The
that.
soils can.
So many things.
Yeah, so many different things, right. And typically, they're presented with a landscape architect that presents a plan for screening, and that's part of the process too, is
And
As
that's
you
well
what,
as-
have to present.
and that's what's already there.
And it's in line with all our other development projects.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're not creating something entirely different for,
One thing, and I'm sorry to put the brakes on this, which is, Matt, I think you raise a very good point, which is this aspect of encouraging communication between the developer and the neighbors, which, in my experience, doesn't always occur. It should occur. And so, to me, and I think it was captured actually in this comment letter at the start, which is kind of like lamenting the fact that, some of these companies, they don't actually engage with the community. And so to me, is there a way to include like a provision to, encourage developers to work with surrounding neighbors to do that? So we're not telling them to do it, but actually like specifying, like encouraging them, like landscaping plan should be designed with, I'd have to put on my lawyer hat. The developer should be encouraged to reach out to impacted neighbors to help address visual impacts.
I don't know if that's something that we would want to codify, just because it isn't really a regulation. However, I can tell you that projects that go to planning board, they ask that question if they've reached out to the neighbors. That's a consistent question that they've asked year after year for all of the projects, because they want to know, and because the residents come out. Like, they tell them. So I'd be hesitant to codify it. But yes, I agree there is value in that, and that should be happening. I don't know if you have any different thoughts on that.
It made me think of the purpose and intent when we were considering this, and how it says that we're promoting, or we intend to encourage renewable energy systems in a way that promotes health, safety, and welfare of the public, and is compatible with surrounding land uses. So when the planning board considers an application before them, they consider compatibility with neighboring properties. And so, they don't only take into context what is happening on that property. They try to receive input from public comment and public hearings for the neighbors to come and voice their opinions on what they would like to see from any development.
I think this is, and I'm agreeing with both of you, I think this is a regulation. How you apply it is where it would come in to say we encourage, and those types of things aren't written into regulations generally, how, like, it's not all in here about, I don't see anything in here about, oh, we're going to have public hearings about it.
Well,
right?
and
Because that's part of another
that is part of
process.
Sure,
another
yeah.
part of the code.
And so, so likewise, I wouldn't, be thinking to see something about encourage communication. That maybe belongs in this other process. I don't know if I made any sense with that.
No, yeah, like, I'm thinking that, like, it's not something that only applies to renewable energy systems, that applies to any development.
Yes.
The screening of any development, so.
I mean, you're talking about goodwill between the town and developer, goodwill between the developer and the neighbors, and all cyclical.
Right.
Okay, so given that, are we fine with the red comment
For screening.
for screening?
Yes.
Good? He's looking still. See, this is the fun part of the room here is, I can see you cogitating.
I mean, are we, I frankly would like to think about it more,
Okay.
unless we're burning for time. I mean, I'm not recommending right now that we hold another public hearing.
No, I
but
mean, so for now, are we okay to process through? We can make a decision after we've reviewed all the comments
Well,
as to
I
what
think
our.
you should look at it a couple ways. Yes, we have plenty of items for this agenda. No, we should not rush through any of them, because all of them deserve valid attention or attention and formal review. However, yes, there is a benefit to going through and providing comments to the town board in a very timely manner. That timely manner does not need to be tonight, but yes, there are benefits to that. If the committee members do not feel that that the code is where we want it to be, that is a valid point to consider. If you think that we need to stay on screening and keep talking about that right now, then we should do that, and let us share your opinion.
yeah, I mean, I think where I'm on screening is, I don't necessarily agree with the proposed comment, but to me, this idea of it'd be interesting for someone to try to find similar type provisions in town codes about, community engagement. So that's something I would like to look into, and maybe there's some proposed language I can suggest.
So I think it's important perhaps to contrast this with what we've written into the code now. I mean, would that be helpful to see what that screening language looks like?
I mean, I recall it was I recall generally what the screening requirements were. And what is not captured in there is, specifically getting feedback from impacted neighbors, which, it seems like almost implicit that you would think that they would get that feedback. And I'll speak from personal experience and say that it doesn't always occur, and that can be actually really disappointing, I think, for every party involved.
So, Stephen, is this, the question here, like, the comment here is specific about, tree sizes and species and spacing and stuff like that. What you're talking about is actually more of a comment about, modifying the actual code itself, which is fine. But are you saying the response to this comment should have something like that, love thy neighbor sort of thing in the response? Or are you saying more about going back to the code and figuring a place to put that?
I'm saying, ultimately, I think it would be wrong to be very prescriptive on what screening requirements should be, because I think it's very subjective and can often be up to an individual person. And so to me, I think a lot of the controversy over these projects is because there's no communication between the most interested parties, which tend to be the developer and the neighbors. And so to me, I think actually promoting that kind of communication, while granted the planning board may do that as a matter of course, I still think it ultimately leads to kind of like loving thy neighbor, and building that line of communication, not just for the screening plan, but then in the future, if there needs to be maintenance or something, that there has been a line of communication already, and then neighbors feel comfortable reaching out to each other. So,
Yeah, I'm just not convinced it's part of this code because it applies to all other development
Everything.
everywhere in the town anyway. I'm going to put in
And-
a shopping mall. It has no res on it.
I agree.
You know, you still want the neighbors to have input. That's what
I
a public
agree with
hearing
the-
does, though.
Right, I agree with that about, it's advantageous. You want relationships, that's, you know, what everything, that's how linkages and moving together in a positive manner. But I agree that it just does not seem to me to be a place for it in this code, because there are provisions throughout the town for any other project. I can see turning around and having to say, oh, now this particular thing, our EPODs don't have that.
Right.
You know, and let's go back now and put something in there as well. So I mean, maybe if this could, include the response to him saying, you know, that this could come out in communications, and the town currently has a process for public hearing and commenting, and, and we encourage working with, that could be part of the response, but not part of the code. So
I would
that's
only-
going to be, that's my stance anyways,
I would only say that their comment doesn't actually state any sort of
communication.
want for that kind of communication. So I don't know if it's appropriate to provide that when they're not actually recommending that.
So-
But I think that, calling out some note that any application before the planning board, well, I should say that any res development that would be coming before the planning board would have a public hearing. So that would be your first opportunity to have that dialogue, collect communication. I mean, the application itself is posted on the website, communication, contacts for the developer are on the application, so that's where you can have that first communication between the neighbors, and you can come out and you can provide your comments in person, you can provide them electronically, you can provide them via mail, fax. There's a lot of opportunities to provide comments on an application.
And I think we should clarify, any res that falls under principal use or tier 3 will have a public hearing. Not all res will have a public hearing, for clarity.
Sure.
But any that have a public hearing, yes, those are the larger scale, those are generally the more impactful. You could technically still have residential neighbors that don't want solar on the house next to them.
Right.
We have residents in town that don't want solar on the house next to them. But I do think specifically to screening, there does need to be the consideration of both sides of it, of I as a resident can put screening on my property, a developer developing next to my property can put screening on their property. It's a two-way street, and I think at minimum, the way the planning board handles it right now, obviously I can't say how they're gonna handle it in 20 years, but the way they handle it right now is they try to make it as equitable as possible, and recognize that it's a two-way street. I will say, no, screening currently, as this comment is, they did not bring up having that communication. But in the email that was sent, that Stephen noted, the resident did mention the benefits of that open communication with one of the current solar field owners in town, and the concern of not having that communication with potential future solar owners. So it is pertinent to this resident's comments overall. Although I would not say it's specific to this screening comment. How would you guys like to proceed?
we can continue down the list, that's
Right.
fine.
Okay.
Maybe we can circle back to adding the sort of comment about in hearings, and we encourage that in a overreaching, in other words, it wasn't in this specific comment, but you said it was the tone of his.
I think we can absolutely have that discussion, but I will be very clear, I do not think that we should have anything in this code specific, this portion of the code specific to public hearings, because that
Right.
already is regulated.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I wasn't suggesting that.
And just to clarify, though, I do think what I'm suggesting is different than public hearing process, which has its pros and cons, frankly, if anybody's ever attended a public hearing. So it's a little bit different than the sort of dialogue I'm at least envisioning in the perfect world.
And,
yes,
what I'm
it's-
talking about is like when a development project comes in, say, multiple home subdivision, having the planning board having that developer reach out to neighbors individually or hold a neighborhood meeting is, I think, more along the lines of what Stephen is speaking about than what we get from a public hearing. So just so you understand the difference.
The public hearing is kind of a very formal process that forces communication potentially, but would be nice if it was more informal and yet formal.
And I think that's why the planning board encourages that.
They already do encourage that.
They do, but it is not a requirement.
Is it a written suggestion anywhere? Is like when somebody fills out their application and you get the steps of what you need to, fill out this application, there's going to be is it anywhere is there, we suggest,
No. So we can talk about the displacement of natural resources comment, item number 3.
So essentially, they were suggesting 30 to 40% maximum coverage in rural residential 2-acre, increasing higher percentages for rural residential 1-acre mixed-use district and business zoning districts. And then I just clarified that both Tier 3 solar energy systems and principal use wind energy systems have a limit in the Res Code of 50% of the area of prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance of parcels included in the project area. And then I cited that in the zoning code for general business, limited business, the LaSalle's Landing District, limited industrial, and mixed-use districts, they all have lot coverage limits of 65% for impervious surfaces and so forth. And so those would include all those impervious surfaces and any structures or impervious surfaces related to renewable energy systems. And then essentially that kind of response from earlier saying that we're trying to strike a balance between zoning and characteristics of the town and potential impacts on the requirements on solar and wind development. I think we're in agreement that we probably want to strike this last part.
Can you scroll up, everyone?
Can I?
Can you scroll up? Thanks. I just want to make sure they can see it.
Yep. Any other comments on this one?
Yeah, I feel like we wrestled with those capacities and limits as we went through the process. So I feel pretty strongly that what we put down was, once again, that kind of good protective and yet not overwhelmingly, non-supportive of res systems. So, I mean, I think we debated it quite a bit.
Okay. We'll continue on then to item number 4. Displacement of agricultural activities. For recently farmed parcels, they're recommending agricultural activity within the last 10 years, a requirement that certain percentages of lot coverage will be preserved and operated as a farming lease, and are they recommending at approximately 50%. The comments or the responses the town put together, property owners of agricultural lands are not required to use or lease them for agricultural activities. There's several reasons that property owners might not choose to actively farm properties, and that we can't really require them to farm their properties, or keep their properties for farming or agricultural activities. That's just not under the town's purview.
Right.
100% agree with that. Agree with deleting that last
Agreed.
sentence.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to item 5, discouraging clear cutting of woodland.
We would love to do that.
Yeah. essentially, the town's response is citing where the EPOD regulations are contained in the code, what their purpose are, and essentially stating that it's special controls over any land development. So that would include res or any other kind of development. And so we, while it may not affect or be under the purview of ORS if it's not over 25 megawatts. I think that by placing additional restrictions on res development arbitrarily compared to all the other type of development that we consider could open the town to litigation or,
But I also don't think that's the only reason that it's not applicable. I think we should treat these things across the board equally. Any kind of development, I think, should be treated equally when it comes to EPODs. And although the draft EPOD legislation has not been approved at this point and it's in process with this committee, I think that will make it even more important and more valuable to have it the same across the board.
Agreed.
Yeah, I personally don't see any benefit of calling it out because the EPOD code should, as you say, be applied across the EPOD.
Areas.
That's what it's for.
Comment 6 or suggestion 6 was discouraging massive scale corporate solar, limiting tier 3 solar installations to one self-contained project per lot with a look-back period of 10 years to ensure that corporate owners are not purchasing and merging multiple lots to create massive projects. The town's comment, town can't discriminate against particular developers or owners of renewable energy systems, nor any other type of development that complies with the town's zoning regulations. Further, the town has no purview or jurisdiction over the purchase or sale of private property, placing, and yeah, I guess that.
I don't think we need that.
Right.
It's accurate, but we don't
yeah.
need that.
I
So-
would add to the response here, because, I mean, I've seen this happen, and what ends up being helpful is seeker, because seeker is intended to evaluate environmental impacts comprehensively and cumulatively, meaning that, if there are two projects side by side, at least under seeker, you need to consider both of those projects at the same time. So to me, I think state law actually addresses this overarching concern of I guess, segmenting projects.
And I can tell you, because of seeker, the stormwater regulations also do that as well.
And if it's over a certain size, ORS kicks in, and that's more stringent than seeker, so.
This is a hypothetical, probably legal question, but if there are 5 5 megawatt projects side by side, developed over the course of, say, 5 years in phases, does ORS step in and regulate that? How would that work?
My understanding is most of where ORAS ends up stepping in is if a project is having trouble moving forward because the code is considered too burdensome. So I think in the example you're giving, I think those would have started to be built or would have went through approval processes. I don't think if, say, 5 different ones came in a row, like what you're talking about, all in the same adjacent land, and none of them got approved, and then they came back trying to make it a 25 watt or megawatt, that's where it would end up changing.
That would
Got it.
happen anyway. It's, the
Yeah.
connection costs would be ridiculous.
It would. And just the work with art, like the process through RG&E would be
Painful.
so painful.
That's helpful, thanks.
That's a good word.
Does that language
think-
seem like an improvement? The seeker review process would also consider the impacts of multiple co-locating projects?
That looks accurate to me.
You know, hyphen and co.
Co-locating.
All right.
Thanks.
Good.
Lighting and glare, essentially recommending requirements to mitigate glare and nighttime lighting. The proposed res code already requires that all solar panels have anti-reflective coatings, and then the town's design and construction specifications support dark sky compliant fixtures whenever possible.
How
So-
did we have that in the res code? Because I thought when we had the discussion on bats, we did talk about lighting.
So it just may be the case that the FAA or, other governing bodies would have restrictions that may not allow for dark sky compliant or may require lighting that isn't dark sky compliant, in which case the town would have to defer to those requirements for the safety of,
Okay.
the health and safety
I do
the general
remember that
public.
now. Thank you.
And so that's why we have that stipulation of dark sky compliant fixtures whenever possible.
And I can also tell you that that is strongly enforced by the planning board.
Yeah.
Yeah, our code says, will not be artificially lighted unless such lighting is required by the Federal Aviation Administration. Which,
Okay.
Moving into number 8, prominence. So essentially saying that accounting for the prominence or if a principal use west or tier 3 solar system were on a hilltop higher than 600 feet. Above sea level. And so that the resident states that this could lead to greater sight lines for these systems. And ultimately, the town doesn't prohibit any other type of development, such as residential or commercial buildings, based on their elevation above sea level. And while the second sentence goes back to that kind of canned response for placing such a regulation, could be seen as unreasonably burdensome, ultimately, we don't want to place or have restrictions on principal use wind energy systems or tier 3 solar systems that are unreasonably burdensome when compared to just all the other type of development that we look at. We're essentially saying that these solar panels don't look nice and we don't want them on high hilltops, whereas another resident may say like, well,
I
this,
think they're pretty.
well, sure, and you'll have another resident that says like, I don't like looking into other people's houses and I don't want houses on that hilltop, so.
Yeah.
Because they could look at me.
Sure.
So is it at least appropriate there, because it does talk about the principal use west, just the idea that we put a height limitation in there of the systems itself? Just to reiterate that was considered.
So I don't think those height limitations are different if the
It's
sea
not.
level elevation is higher or lower.
No, I
So I
understand.
don't think that's specifically applicable
So you
to
don't think
this.
that was his concern, the sighting itself?
is there anywhere in Penfield that's above
Oh, yeah.
600?
I was going to say, or is it all, is there
I
anything
feel
with
they're all
that's a
below.
hill?
I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, that's what I was
I mean,
hoping
I
Matt
can-
would come in with a
I
map
can tell
and
you
say,
there are
it's for
hills in
location.
Penfield that have previously been developed and residents were not happy about those hills being developed. That isn't even for res or wind, or for res at all. But I can tell you residents were not thrilled with hills in Penfield being developed.
Yeah, I mean, but I know if
There
I
were
owned a
some residents
property
that
that
probably
had a
didn't care.
hill, that's where I'd want my house is.
There was a development on Empire where, I think it's a brewery now, but Jazzberries was there at one time, and, oh,
K2
it's,
Brewing is there now.
yeah, K2 Brew. And so they,
There's
you know,
nothing above
they wanted to
400.
have building of houses up at the top of the hill and then a high rise, or I don't know how high, on the bottom of the hill, and I guess that's what you're referring to. There's nothing to say, don't put the the higher elevation up at the top of the hill, and that's what he's looking for.
Seems very arbitrary, 600 feet. Why not 700? Why not, 550? The answer is fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, the answer is acceptable.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was all of the
Ah.
comments. I guess the one thing is that, I emailed you the full email that they sent to the town board, and I pulled out just the proposals, which excludes the portion of the email where they cite their concerns with commercial development of renewable energy systems and not being able to communicate with them. So whereas like these comments address those proposals, it could be that we look at the full email and see if we can address maybe that concern or have some sort of response for that specific concern. Does that seem appropriate?
I wouldn't like that, yeah. I mean, it'll sound very kumbaya, but I frankly think that can be helpful in alleviating a lot of controversy associated with these systems.
And to be clear, I don't think it's just kumbaya. The town board has asked us to review the comments, and that is part of the comments.
It's great to know that the Monroe County Water Authority has been a good partner. That's excellent.
Agreed.
So just for clarification, because the concerns were a corporate owner neighbor, I mean, how would that be defined? I mean, I'm just kind of
That's
curious
public.
based
He has
on
to say
my-
that at a public hearing, yeah.
on my history in terms of, how would that, anybody that's a corporation owning property would be, he kind of felt that they would be less communicative than
So
any other neighbor?
I would address that as the town does not is not allowed to discriminate against a corporate entity versus a residential neighbor. We can't discriminate between. The regulations need to be universal. If the town board, this committee, feels that having commercial solar in town is not what is desired, then I think we would take different measures than we're currently taking.
Okay, so read that as commercial solar versus just a corporation putting in a res system.
I mean, that's truthfully how I read it.
Okay.
I guess there is the option of maybe a business owns a piece of property and they're putting in solar for their property, but I read it more as like principal use
Okay.
or like something they're making money off of the production of electricity.
Okay.
Not they're using it for their business to be
That
powered.
makes more sense.
I think in the tone of his letter, he's not, or he's, without saying it, is already acknowledging that the town can't outwardly say, oh, we don't want, conglomerates in here. I think that he was trying to get at it through a back door of, well, if we put all these other things in, it will end up discouraging that.
Okay.
So I guess I'm just wanting to say, I don't think that he's in, responding that we can't, do that or discourage, I'm not sure that that's what was actually looking for or expecting the town to outwardly discourage.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like one of his proposals was explicitly like, do not let.
Right,
Yeah,
yes,
it was
thank you.
more of just like citing or things like that that may make
May
it so
end
that
up
it's not
discouraging
feasible
that.
for a corp, yeah.
Thank you, Matt, that's what I'm trying to say. I need my interpreter here.
Yes.
Okay, so given the review, and we've made at least one addition, is that correct? Did I hear that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And so, the seeker component,
Yeah.
and then is there any other comments that we would like to add to this? Do we want to somehow, do you write a letter to go with our response back?
It depends on the project.
Okay. Because, just
And it
just
depends what
thinking,
the town board's looking for. Sometimes it's more of an email goes with it
okay.
than a letter.
Just because the idea of ensuring, or mentioning that it was a concern of communication, is that's something that would go in a cover or an email to accompany the comments, I think, more than a formal comment.
Within his letter, asked to have his proposals read out loud, so isn't that really what we should respond to?
These
So-
are the proposals
Proposals, right.
as, yes.
So, two things. Having the proposals read out loud at a meeting, that's not something that the town performs.
No.
Obviously, if a resident wants to come to a public hearing and speak and read it, they are allowed to. At public hearings, the residents are limited to a 5-minute period to speak. Realistically, by going through these and, sharing them at this meeting, we're probably doing more than most comments that come by email would happen at a public hearing.
I guess my point
I-
is
Yeah.
is that we've addressed his points, essentially. Like, I don't think we need to respond to his full email.
Oh.
You know,
Well, and because I don't know if the committee members are aware, like, these responses will go to the town board on behalf of this committee. They're not going back to the
Correct.
resident.
correct.
However, if he watches the stream, he's heard all of our responses.
Or she.
Or he or she, yeah.
It's Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron.
Aaron. Them.
Looks like a.
Could I add one more thing, though? So our job is to sort of be semi-experts informing the town board, and I think one thing that's missing from his email is, he's got concerns about hypothetical commercial industries working in Penfield, but there are benefits. He invited us to look at the project being built locally, and the town and the schools are getting millions of dollars over the life of the project. There's no burden on infrastructure, and there's 2 full-time jobs coming out of it, 150 full-time jobs during construction, and they're local jobs. So I think the town board should be aware that projects like that could be a positive for the town.
I agree with that completely. Does anyone not feel that that should be included? Just to give people their space.
Well, sometimes I think that when you put more in and raise new topics, although I agree with all of that, it gives more of a, well, now let me respond to all of that and talk back to your saying these things are
So
positive.
I would like.
yes, that can happen, but this is a conversation at this meeting.
Okay.
This is not a conversation between this committee and the town board or the town, well, I don't know if the town board chooses to speak with the resident, how they handle that. But it's not a conversation with this committee and the resident. It is just a recommendation and / responses from this committee to the town board.
Right, and in
So-
that, I would
so-
like the town board to know.
Okay, all right. I
I think
it's
that
fine
would be
then.
applicable.
I just want to know it wasn't necessarily going to the individual unless they decide they want to include it. That's, yeah, I agree with that.
My request would be, you have that data in front of you. Can you either give us that data so we're not typing it during the meeting, and/or provide at the end of the document just a little paragraph of the resident brought up this concern, here are some benefits to that.
And I send that to the whole group, right? Or
Oh, I just say go in the Word doc and,
Oh.
the Google Doc and put it in if
She,
that's okay.
no, you only have
can.
well, you can add it in a comment, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's great. Right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Just, I think it'll work better that way. Cool.
Okay, so do we have a decision to make at this point, whether or not we've discussed this enough?
I think you could consider suggesting to town staff to draft a letter that would provide these comments to the town board along with the information that Katie has provided.
Would somebody
in
like,
response.
Someone can make that as a
would
motion.
somebody like
yes.
to make that
I
as a
would like to
motion?
make that as a motion, everything Matt just said.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any additional discussion? As in, I think,
I think I'm in line with what you proposed, Katie. I would like to look at the cover letter before it goes out, obviously, perhaps. Just in case, to me, I think like there is this sentiment that solar can work, and here's a successful example of it. And part of that its success comes from the willingness of the developer to engage with the surrounding community. So to me, I think emphasizing that as much as possible, that latter point would matter a lot to me.
It would be a good point to include it.
Would you like to propose something written in the document if you have something specific in mind? It sounds like you have something specific in mind. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to yeah, I can do that.
so you just add a
And-
comment into the document.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just for reference, I will tell you, the town has had a good relationship with Monroe County Water Authority pertaining to their solar project in town, and they went above and beyond regulations with contacting the town and such. However, I can tell you that not all of the neighbors are thrilled with that solar development. That's not to say Monroe County Water Authority is specifically doing anything wrong, but I can tell you, although we have one happy resident, we may not have all of the neighboring residents be happy. So yes, I agree, communication is beneficial and can be helpful, but it may not resolve all of the possible problems.
I mean, from my perspective, if you think about like risk management, and then this includes from like the town's perspective in not getting sued, is the more people who are against the project, the more likely they are to hire a lawyer like me sometimes to challenge a project. And like if you engage with enough community members, yeah, you're never going to make everyone happy. But to me, from a risk management perspective, I think it just makes a ton of sense to do so.
Great.
Okay, so we have is there any other discussion regarding the motion that's on the floor? Okay, if so, do you want to do a roll call?
Sure. Cavaliere,
Aye.
Cheremeteff,
Aye.
Daly,
Aye.
Green,
Aye.
Rygg,
Aye.
and Schichler.
Aye.
All right. So yeah, we will draft that letter comprising of all those materials.
Okay.
I think we can move on from
Yes, yes.
this item.
Our
and then
next
move
item
into
is clean energy community actions.
I can tell you there are no new clean energy community actions at this time. However, we have received some more submissions towards our community campaigns for clean heating, cooling, and electric vehicles. So that is bringing us closer to where we need to be for submission for those high-impact action items. Although we cannot submit for those high-impact action items at this time because that that is closed at this time essentially through NYSERDA. Coming early next year, we should be able to submit. So we're continuing on with those projects, continuing to accept any documentation of electric vehicle purchases within town, documentation of installation of geothermal systems and/or heat pumps or air source heat pumps. Yeah. However, there is the time frame of that goes back to 2021, and they have to have some kind of documentation of installation by a company.
And also heat pump water heaters.
Oh, that's what I was missing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hybrid vehicles do not count. They have to be plug-in electric vehicles, to be clear. So we are accepting that at this time.
Okay. We'll move on to old business. Now, just to have you guys, the EPOD code is next on our agenda. Is that the most appropriate use of our time? To move that forward?
Can I change slightly and share some information, and then we get into EPOD? Because I think EPOD will take us to the end of our
Sure,
agenda.
yeah.
Okay.
So I would like to move items 5, B, and C up. That's Mayor's Monarch Pledge and Tree City USA. They're just informational. Tree City USA, the application has been submitted. We have not gotten approval or denial at this time, or any feedback, but it has been submitted. For Mayor's Monarch Pledge, we have been approved for this year.
Yay.
Great.
Yay.
And
That's good news.
that's great, because monarchs are supposedly going on the endangered, threatened, one of those lists, yeah.
Yep.
Great news, though.
And I would like to personally say thank you for the community members that have helped, as well as this committee that have helped with those projects, because staff could not have done that without you. So both people in this committee, as well as residents that are not here at this time.
I will not take credit because I was.
Yes. And that
But
effort really
congratulations.
is very much appreciated. The community supporting these things makes all the difference.
With that, that's all I have on those two items. I think, do you want me to go over
I
two
think
other short
that's-
items, or do you want to go into EPOD?
I think why don't we go ahead and we'll dedicate at least 15, if I'm looking at the clock right, 15 minutes to it, and then we'll kind of see how much time we think we'll need for new business. So I might choose to end it at that point in time at 5 of 6 and do the last items.
I'm okay with that.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
So first we'll look at the draft amendment to Chapter 250. Roy, you had a comment about potentially adding some sorts of terms of when EPOD maps will be updated. I've added in language that says that the mapped features shall be assessed on an annual basis and updated by town staff based on information and materials provided by the state and federal agencies. I say shall be assessed only because, I think that the firm maps are a perfect example of how EPOD mapping should be handled and updated, is that there's an authoritative source that says, like, these are what the maps are, and they notify us exactly when they're updated. They also notify us when they're anticipating updates to the mapping, and so we can anticipate when the updates may be needed. When it comes to streams, that's, like, they don't always let us know when a Class B stream becomes a Class C stream. And so that's why I think that saying that, shall be assessed, puts a burden on town staff to at least assess what the latest information is for any of the EPODs, and look at them on an annual basis and then update them as needed when an authoritative source provides the better or more informed materials. So does that?
Love it, fully
Great.
support it.
Beautiful. All right. Getting into this comment of, it's in the exempt activities, but ultimately I think that it's kind of generally considering if somebody were to clear cut up to a half acre for any of these exempt activities, whether it's landscaping or removal of dead or deteriorating trees, any one of those, and then continually do that in the name of an exempt activity. Ultimately, it's a difficult discussion because if we were to put more stringent a smaller threshold for coming in and requiring review, then it could be so burdensome to any sort of maintenance. Sure. Yeah.
So let me stop there. I actually have no problem with the half acre.
Sure. Yeah.
My concern is that you, what was that term you used earlier? Sequentially do it, consecutively do it. So like, let's say you have a 10-acre EPOD on your property and you say, well, I'm going to take a half an acre and do some landscaping. Well, that doesn't require an EPOD permit. Then I'm going to do another half acre, do landscaping. Doesn't require an EPOD permit. I'm going to do another half acre. Doesn't require an EPOD permit. Until before long, all 10 acres are gone. So is there a way to word this so you can't circumvent the EPOD permit by using the exemptions? And not, obviously you need the exemptions of the half acre, but you can't sequentially use the exemptions to circumvent the EPOD permit.
So I would like clarity, because maybe I'm misunderstanding something. The exemptions allow you to do that to whatever amount, like whatever extent. It's not limited at half an acre.
I'm sorry?
So it being an exemption from getting an EPOD permit So for example, gardening activities, that's one of the exemptions. It's not limited to half an acre. Say you have an acre of EPOD on your property, you're allowed to garden on all of that. That's an exemption.
The clear
Where-
cutting of a half an acre is allowed in the landscaping
If that.
earthworks.
If.
Yes.
Right.
So that's what changes it, is if it's earthwork. So I don't think the exemptions affect it.
It's the earthwork.
I think it's earthwork affects it.
Do we have the definition? Is earthwork like a standard knowledge?
Yeah, before we get too far in this, because we
Yeah.
changed that language.
okay.
We didn't change the definition of earthwork, I should say.
Yes, so yes,
Earthwork
earthwork
is
has a definition.
construction activities including clearing, grading, excavating, soil disturbance, or placement of fill that result in land disturbance. We had discussed earlier today, town staff, that if we only considered earthwork, then that would essentially say that a resident would be able to say like, well, I'm not grading the entire area, or I'm not filling this entire area. I'm just plucking out the tree, and the rest of the area isn't being disturbed. So how do
was a
we,
long
like, what are
conversation.
we considering in removal of a half acre of EPOD? If the resident is only removing the trees and not grading the areas between the trees, are we really considering that to be a total half acre disturbance, or are we only, quantifying it as the excavating of that tree stump? So we modified the language in the, let's see, here.
There.
So
Regulated activities.
regulated activities is now simply earthwork and/or tree removal on half acres or more in a woodland EPOD shall require an EPOD permit to be obtained. And then it cites this section for exempt activities. The one thing you'll notice is that we've also removed commercial timber harvesting, because it was kind of confusing of like, okay, so are we saying that commercial timber harvesting at any amount is permitted? And technically, no. In order to do commercial, I believe it's section 5 of the amendment, we're adding a portion to the code where it requires someone to get a timber harvesting permit for any amount. But when you're doing commercial timber harvesting that removes trees in an area greater than half an acre, then you'd have to get an additional EPOD permit.
So would that change though? Because you must have just did that, because I didn't see that.
We
earlier.
did
Yes,
this
this-
afternoon,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So ultimately, how I interpret this change is that if you are landscaping and removing trees that equates to more than half an acre, it's no longer an exempt activity. It is now a regulated activity because it's beyond that threshold of half an acre.
Okay.
Do you interpret it differently?
On woodland. So is that changing,
I want to hear the
Number
answer to that
6 of the
question.
exempt?
interesting.
Is that changing the wording in number 6?
Sorry, Cynette.
What?
So we're talking about the exempt activities in section E, right? That's the impact
to
that you're
look at it to
talking
know.
Yeah,
about?
exempt activities that are applicable to all EPODs.
And then there's 2 that are woodland EPOD specific.
Yeah, so those are removal of trees for firewood, and then the removal of trees for landscaping purposes, right?
Which is what I
As
made
long
the
as they
comment on.
comply with the limits set forth in I-3A. Is that where the limit of the half acre is?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, just making the connection.
yeah.
Yeah.
Roy, maybe want to return to one of your points, though, because I thought is what you were talking about, which is that if someone, say, removes a quarter of an acre 1 month, and then the next month removes a quarter of an acre, and then the next month removes a quarter of an acre, they've exceeded that threshold,
Okay, thanks.
but,
They didn't do it all at once.
right.
Right, that's what-
Is that what you're,
Yeah.
okay, all
That's my
right.
think
point.
that's-
Which I think is a fair concern. And I don't know, should we include within a 1-year time frame or something? I don't know.
What if it's a 5-year time frame?
Well, I mean, I think at some point you have to say like it's a separate project, but like.
What if they just drive a road down through the middle of their property and then all of a sudden it's.
That's earthwork, though.
Yeah, but
Right,
it's
so that's-
a long skinny road.
What if anything happens that is a loophole? Like, I think we have to set limits on
Yeah.
what expansive loopholes are possible, because I think it's unrealistic for us to think that we can reasonably address every single possible loophole. Now, I think that goes back to a comment that Matt put in, I think today, so sorry if that's the timing. But it is important that we're looking at this as the point of the town board having this committee review EPOD code is because we're trying to make it more enforceable and easier for residents to follow and understand. And Matt wrote that way better in his comment than I just said it. But with that, if we make it so burdensome that it's hard for residents to understand, to implement, and/or the town does not have the capacity to chase after these potential violations, then it's not getting enforced and/or it's not getting implemented.
Right, so
So there has to be a balance.
I stand by my response to that comment, which is, I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I like the exemptions.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, if we can clarify the language to say that you can't, sequentially,
Careful of your feet.
oops.
Sorry.
I know, I'm going to do it too.
Sorry, you kicked the
Leave it
TV.
over.
Sorry, please don't.
Between Roy and I keep pushing the table.
Yeah. Honestly, it's like, if we can just clarify the language a little bit to say that for that woodland one specifically, that you can't, or you shouldn't, or I don't know how you want to word it, but, sequentially take that exemption and over the course of time, basically not apply for an EPOD because you're just doing a little bit at a time.
Of course, if you, yeah.
That goes back to, I think, Stephen's question of what is that length of time? Like, what is the look-back period? And my question would be, how do we implement that?
Yeah.
So like, I don't even remember how many acres you own in town or elsewhere, but say you own 30 acres and you landscape 0.49 of an EPOD this year, and next year you do 0.49 again. That falls under the 0.5, like edge.
Well, what if I do it in, 1 week and the next week I do it,
Well, and that's part of my
the next
question.
week I do another.
So that, I would say, is different than like doing it year after year.
The way it's written, though, there's no timing on there. So I could theoretically do that every day, 0.49, and I'm within the code.
Do we think that, because I know where you're
I
coming
understand what you're
from
saying.
with, on both sides, because after this is over, I'll tell you about Medicaid loophole and what was done. And it could not be addressed, it could not be fixed. But how often
And I would say,
would it happen to make us go through gyrations?
I mean, I would say that my example and your example are two different probably ends of the spectrum. Whereas like for tree clearing specifically or disturbance work, if you do it week after week or day after day, that's where code enforcement and/or a resident or town staff are gonna go, Matt, what's happening on that property? I drove by this property and like, what are they doing? And that's where it comes to the town and we go, oh, well, it looks like they're clearing trees or it looks like they're disturbing that soil. Soil disturbance does not get resolved quickly. And by that I mean, soil does not become undisturbed quickly. So there is a relatively easy look-back period for that for town staff.
Right, but I'm saying it's not even illegal to do that, according to the way this code is written right now.
It is,
It's a allowable exemption,
it is by the town stormwater regulations, truthfully.
but not under the EPOD.
But not
code.
under the EPOD code.
Correct. That was my point. That's my
Sure.
my only point
However,
about that woodland.
the
And it's-
point to at
it
least
is-
look at
it
is
is a
that this
loophole.
is actually, with the linking of the two, is actually more protective than what it was before. Because landscaping was just landscape, it was just called out.
Right.
It was not
Yeah.
necessarily unless you've exceeded this limit.
Sure.
So it is one of those things. So I think we're definitely heading toward more protective, which is good. It's just, unfortunately, Roy, I think like you think, which of course Matt got my full. What if somebody came through? I mean, I did all the scenarios with him last week, very
And-
similarly.
I guarantee you that staff has had tons of conversations about possible scenarios.
And I'm not
I
trying to
guess
minimize
Well,
the
no,
exception
I-
either.
I-
I think
my-
it's a viable scenario,
Yeah.
though.
My-
a
I
realistic
think
one.
there's a definite loophole, and there may be other loopholes in there that we haven't even discovered, and you don't know till after the fact. The question becomes, can we reasonably do something about that? Is it a big enough loophole that numerous parties would take advantage of?
So I think my question to the committee is there language that you would want implemented?
Yeah, we'd have to come up with, is there some way to quantify a time? Is there some way to quantify a level? And of course, the other thing is to think about just the word landscaping does not mean that they have to chop down trees and put in lawn. It could mean that they remove trees to plant other trees or other things that they like better. So it might not necessarily do that. But I did get the flag here that we do need to
I would-
somehow wrap nicely right now.
I'll recommend that town staff can look at maybe other portions of the town code, see if we have similar look-back periods for anything, how we enforce those, and other model codes, and look to the town attorney, any sort of advice that we can get that may help us inform any sort of look-back periods for exempt activities, and we can discuss at the next EECC meeting, but I think we want to move into new
Okay.
business.
So let's go ahead and go through our items for new business. The first one is the call for the new EECC member.
Okay, I'll speak to that. Earlier this year, the town board expanded this committee from 5 to 7 people due to the workload and the importance of the work that's done here. Subsequently, there was a resignation, which resulted in an opening. So there is an opening on this committee. It is posted on the town website at penfield.org. If you are interested, submit a resume and letter of intent outlining your qualifications. All Penfield residents are eligible to apply, and also high school students can serve, but they are unable to vote. If anyone needs assistance applying, they can call 340-8630, and the applications are due by Friday, December 20th.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, very good. Energy efficiency and conservation block grant.
So we talked about this incredibly briefly a long time ago. There was an opportunity for the town of Penfield to apply for an energy efficiency conservation block grant through the federal government. It's money that essentially was set aside for the town, that's what a block grant is in this situation, for energy efficiency and conservation measures. There's a whole slew of things that we could have done. We submitted an application for purchase of an electric vehicle. We were approved, and the town should be getting approximately $76,300 towards that.
That's great.
Love it. Congratulations.
Excellent.
What are we going to get?
Good question. An electric vehicle.
Okay.
We just found out not too long ago, and we have a new DPW director, so we really need to look at what's available first. But likely a light to medium duty vehicle.
Great.
We currently own a Bolt EUV. as
What's
our
the
only.
timeline on that?
We'll look to purchase next year, 2025.
Okay.
Very good. It's exciting. Okay, upcoming events. Matt is calling up the
Katie, would you like
Penfield
to?
Rex book, which is phenomenal for identifying things.
Yeah, I would love to share. Megan Meyer is running this class again, The Art of Native Seed Sowing. It's so much fun. I strongly encourage everyone who's remotely a gardener. It's so great. It's a 2-session class, January 11th and 18th from 9 to 10:30. There is a $5 fee, which covers the price of soil that you'll get to take home. So you'll go home with lots of great seeds.
And for reference, Megan has worked with us previously to provide the town with the number of the attendance number for that class, so that we can submit that as part of our Mayor's Monarch Pledge items. Because part of that class is, well, it doesn't matter. Because of what that class is, we've been able to include that for effort towards Mayor's Monarch Pledge in the
I
past.
love it. Yeah, combine the two.
That's very
That's
good.
great.
Okay. Are there any other upcoming events that need noted?
Not at this time.
If not, is there any other new business?
I'd like to fall back, sorry. I know
That's fine.
our time is limited, so whatever you guys want is 100% fine. Something to consider, whether briefly or for our next meeting. We have made substantial changes to the EPOD code the draft EPOD code since the last public hearing. So what that means is the town board will likely need to hold another public hearing for the draft EPOD code. If the committee feels that this current draft is far enough along that there will not be substantial changes, something that is substantial is, are we removing the policy that we have now put forward? That would be a substantial change. That if there's no substantial changes, then the town board can set a date for a public hearing. The soonest at this time that date would be is February. I want to say the first week of February. It's that town board meeting. With the town board schedule, there is a benefit to this committee encouraging the town board to set a date for that public hearing. The draft code would be published up to at minimum 10 days ahead of that date. But they could set the date for that public hearing as of next week, or they can wait until January. Their January meeting is generally an organizational meeting, so it's incredibly long and drawn out. So it would be beneficial to them if this committee wants them to move forward with that public hearing to encourage them to do that. So first off, do you all understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
I used a lot of words for, I don't know.
So
so
I'm
if this-
probably the one that's the most confused. So we're going to need to break it down one more time. Sorry.
There is a benefit to this committee holding a motion and making the motion to encourage the town board to hold a public hearing for EPOD next year.
In February or
If February is the soonest they
okay,
can
okay.
do a public
Okay,
hearing.
that was what, I wasn't quite sure if some of the other language was
January, there's
changing
just
it.
not
Okay.
time.
Then the question is, are we in a place comfortably to say that we want to do
Yes.
that? Or are
Okay,
we
so
gonna-
we very likely will have time in our January meeting before it needs to be
Published.
sent out, published, that's the word.
Yes.
Okay.
Were there many comments after the one we were just discussing?
We
that
have a couple
Maria-
open items, I would say.
I would say we have a few open
But we're definitely
items.
getting closer. So I guess at this point, we need to have a motion. Do we?
I would like to make that motion of Sarah saying that we would like to encourage at this time to ask
The
the
town board
town
to set a
board to
date
set a date for a public hearing
for the draft EPOD.
for the draft EPOD for February.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
Okay.
Okay.
Is there discussion? Please.
Yes. So my question on this is, if you set the hearing date and there is substantial changes between now and the time that it has to be published, would you have to then set another public hearing date?
The only reason they would have to set another public hearing date is if after it's published, there's substantial changes. So that brings us to the week of our next meeting. So if after our next meeting, there's substantial changes, or even at our next meeting, there's substantial changes, I would encourage the committee to say, hey, guys, you might not want to do that meeting, you might want to wait another month.
So,
If there are not substantial changes, then they would just proceed with the public hearing.
so
That's
So-
why
As long
I
as we
really
get
want to
through
throw
the
it to you guys.
get through the comments to the next meeting, I'm okay with going forward with the public hearing date.
But if we have substantial information or things we want to remove, we need to do it through this Google Docs process before the next meeting, right? Is that what
You
you're
have to
saying?
agree to it at the next meeting, though.
Right,
Yes.
we have
Right.
to have
Agree to it at
agreement.
our
It's not so
meeting.
much the change, but that we've agreed to the change.
Right.
So it can be published,
Yeah.
We just need to reserve enough time to get through it at the next meeting.
as long as nothing
My understanding is
unusual
that
comes
it's,
up.
Okay. We will make sure
Yeah.
that that is the planning for that meeting, if that is the priority. Okay. Do you want to, is there any other discussion, or can we do the roll call?
so do you guys understand that your motion is to encourage the town board to set a date for public hearing in February?
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
Okay.
all right. Cavaliere,
Aye.
Cheremeteff,
Aye.
Daly,
Aye.
Green,
Aye.
Rygg,
Aye.
Schichler.
Aye.
All right.
We'll provide that information to the town board. Sorry to hold you over.
That's okay.
It's okay.
I'm fine with that. Is there anything else? If not, okay. This meeting is declared adjourned at 6:05 PM. I always do this math the wrong way. The next meeting is January 9th. So now it's closed.
2025.
2025.
Oh.
Sorry,
Thank
that's my
you.
fault.
And we're